Welcome to Grand Prairie Proud. Eric Alvarez here in Marketing and Communications. And you know, one of my favorite things about working here for the city of Grand Prairie is getting to discover those fascinating stories of the people we work with. Maybe you know their names, maybe you know their faces, but do you really know the stories behind who they are at work? How did they get here? And to talk about that, we have Andrew Natal from IT.
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell me, what's your role here for IT?
I'm a senior support specialist for the IT department. We do all City Hall side.
Okay. Now, one of the things that fascinated me when I learned about it was that you were in the Coast Guard.
Yes, sir.
And you were in Alaska.
Yes, sir.
Is that right? Tell me a little bit about what that was like.
Well, as you would imagine, cold. The winters were very dark, but it was a beautiful place to be. You never get tired of the scenery. And then I worked on a 275-foot buoy tender out there, so a lot of time on the water. So basically, the buoy tender, what it does is every X amount of years, those buoys got to get pulled up. The chain has to be changed. The battery has to be swapped out for the lights that blink on time. And at the very bottom is a giant block, center block, which is a sinker that holds it in place. Every once in a while, you got to swap those sinkers out too. So basically, we just pull it up, see what it needs to be maintenance, and the guys would work on it and then drop them back down there.
Okay, now you mentioned it was cold, and I think a lot of us can assume that it was cold, but what do you mean when you say that? Did you ever have to go in the water? Was it the air? What was it?
So we did jump in the water a few times, but that was more so fun things and like initiation thing for a thing called Blue Nose Polar Bear was one of them. So we did what's called an Arctic jump one time. Water was like 45 degrees that day. And we had a whole safety briefing beforehand. You had 15 minutes before hypothermia kicked in. You weren't allowed to play in the water. Like, it was just literally dive in and get right back out. But the coldest it got temperature-wise, I think it was 2 degrees one morning with a wind chill of -8. That day we were moored up to the pier. But I remember I was walking across the pier to do breakfast to get to the boat. And it was so hard just to make that like 15-yard walk to the cutter. So yeah, it was freezing that morning. But that was the worst one.
How long were you in the Coast Guard in Alaska?
The Coast Guard in Alaska, 2 years and 11 months.
What would you say was the best part, your favorite part, the most fun part?
The snowboarding. It's not a long season for snowboarding there because we don't really have a really big mountain or anything, but I fell in love with snowboarding there. I still try to go when I can, but I haven't been in a long time. But not to Alaska. I went snowboarding in Colorado last time.
Well, that sounds great. I've never been snowboarding or skiing for that matter. A funny story. I used to live in Switzerland when I was a little kid.
Oh, wow.
I was 2 to 4 years old, so I have no memory of it whatsoever. Yeah. There's pictures of my family skiing, but I was so little that I was just sitting in the snow, but I have no memory whatsoever. So I'm a little jealous of you. What would you say was the hardest part of your time?
Just the distance. It feels like you're so far away because, really you are. From Texas to Alaska is basically 2 countries across. So the distance was the hardest. The time difference was the hardest. Getting, in contact with family. I kept in contact all the time, but the time difference and the distance was probably the hardest part. And then the winters. It's just, you get like 18 hours of darkness on average through the winters, and the shortest day of the year is like 2 hours and 45 minutes of sunlight, which if you can even count it as sunlight, the sun could just kind of came up from behind the mountain, would peak for a second, and it was right back behind the mountains. So yeah, the winters definitely.
How did that affect you?
I slept a lot. I avoided, because they give you briefings on all that. You can get depressed and this and that, but I stayed in a routine. I went to the gym daily, but the other thing was it was so easy to sleep a lot. Like, I was sleeping 12 hours a night some nights because I'd wake up and it'd be pitch black still, and I'd just go right back to sleep.
Do you ever miss being able to sleep so well?
Sometimes, yeah. Definitely now. I got 3 girls, so I miss being able to sleep that well.
So tell me a little bit about what you did. What was your day-to-day?
I was a cook. I was one of the cooks on the cutter. So that included breakfast, salad bar, dessert, lunch, dinner, cleanups from all of that. So on average, my days were about 14 to 16 hours. And when I was not in the groove of things, like when I first got out into the fleet and had to learn, because you get your A school, but when you get into the fleet, that's when things get real. So once I got there, like the first few weeks was like 17-hour days sometimes, just because you got to learn how to have a subordinate, and at 19 years old, trying to tell another 19 or 18-year-old to like, hey man, do this, do that. It took a lot of adjusting. So, but yeah, I was just cooking.
So it sounds like there were a lot of good things about it and some challenging things about it. How would you say your time in the Coast Guard, if at all, helps you in what you do for the city of Grand Prairie?
Well, I think what I really learned from the Coast Guard, and I credit this to one of my supervisors who was just great. Just never stop learning, never stop growing, always trying to build yourself further, in whatever you're doing. He taught me to be hungry about furthering myself in my career, and I feel like I carried that with me throughout since. So
what would you say is your favorite part of what you do now?
Now, I just like helping people, to be honest. Like when I can, the little excitement they get after I finish helping them with an issue they were dealing with, that for me is like gratification. I feel good about helping them and stuff.
Well, a lot of times when we reach out in our own way, we've tried everything we know to do. And so I can't speak for everybody, but I know that a lot of times I try everything I can to fix it. And so when I reach out, it's when I really need help. So when you come and you've already come to help me do it a couple times, it really does. It's a feeling of gratitude, and people that have that specialization and that know what they're doing, that's really important. But I've always been curious, is there, how often is it that you go and something just needed to be plugged in?
It happens quite often.
Uh-huh.
Probably like every week there's something like, oh, I just hit the power button, or I just restarted. But that's job security.
Yeah, no, I think it happens, and it's happened to me before. Yeah. Not with like the actual PC or the device, but like a printer, for example. Some of the cable may have gotten loose.
Right. That's actually called cable creep. When a cable comes out without like anything happening, it's the thing that happens with technology. It's called cable creep.
Okay.
It creeps out.
Well, it's not our proudest moment when that happens, and you're like, you just kind of put it back in there, and everything works all of a sudden.
It's all good. It's easy work.
Was there ever a feeling that you got when you were out in the Coast Guard in Alaska where you had that same feeling of being able to help someone who literally was, struggling out there?
Being a cook on a boat is a lot like being a therapist. Everyone comes to you and they want to talk about their life issues. So there was times that I was just like a ear for somebody, and that did feel good to be able to be a shoulder for them, or in sorts, because going up there, some people just can't handle it well, and then obviously life is complicated. It throws things at you. So I was 19, 20, 21 dealing with grown man issues. They just would come to me and complain and stuff, but it's just something about being a cook. And even my boss told me, he's like, yeah, that's gonna happen your whole career.
So when you look at it all kind of together, when you started out a young person going off to Alaska, and then putting in your time there, and then coming back here to North Texas, how would you describe your journey overall? You're still a young guy, but so far, the story of Andrew so far.
I think it's one with a lot of growth involved there, So going somewhere different, getting way out of your comfort zone, and just meeting people from all over the country, it's one of the best things I could have ever done for myself, because it just makes you like more accepting, more open to everybody, and it just makes life easier in general. I think just to get that experience and stuff.
It makes sense. It's a challenging job to be out there and to be away from home and to be in all that darkness. So it's really cool that you were able to help them in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, Andrew, thank you for joining us here on Grand Prairie Proud and for telling your story.
Yeah, it was awesome.